Hello, it's Rebecca here from Precious Pages Papercraft, and today I'm designing a layout for Papermaze. And this month I'm working with Echo Park's The Magic of Christmas collection. Obviously it's December, it had to be a Christmas collection, and I love this one. It's very traditional, sort of reds and greens, very Christmassy. And I'm scrapping a photo from last Christmas. I think it was actually taken Christmas Eve, the three of us in front of our tree. I always seem to be a year behind with my Christmas scrapping, because I find that I sort of take loads of photos leading up to Christmas and then obviously Christmas Day. But once Christmas is out of the way, it's then my little boy's birthday, and before I get a chance to scrap my Christmas photos, it's kind of like long forgotten. So I never really scrap the year that we're currently in. So I'm still scrapping last year's Christmas photos, and I'm sure that by the time next year comes, I will be scrapping this year's photos. But that's just the way I seem to work with Christmas, bizarrely. I've got a small photo today. It's slightly smaller than 3x4, and my idea was to have lots of strips of patterned papers behind it. So I started off with that lovely green checkered paper that's called Stuffed Stockings, and I've cut just a thin strip of that, and then a wider strip of that lovely red paper that says ho 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 all over it. That one's called Holiday Prep. And I'm tearing the top edges, and also top and bottom edges of these papers, and I'm tearing it in the direction so that the white edge shows, just because I wanted that texture and that kind of rustic look. I've fussy cut lots of poinsettias and leaves from the poinsettias and pine patterned paper, and they're very sort of traditional and rustic looking, so I wanted those edges to kind of match the theme. I've also cut out one of the 6x4 journaling cards from the journaling cards paper, and I've used that. It said something in the middle, if it was merry and bright or something like that, but I've covered the words up. I just wanted the green floral pattern just showing behind my photo, and that worked really well for that. And then finally I've got a strip of another pattern paper. I'm trying to remember which one it was now. It's the present, so that one is called Giving Gifts, and just that was just to bring a bit more white to the page. I had lots of reds and greens overlapping, so I wanted something with a little bit of white in it to kind of break it up a bit. And again, torn those edges, and I'm going to go through and distress all the other edges of those papers for a lot more texture. I've also cut a little like a bauble or ornament from the, I think it's a 3x4 journaling paper, but it didn't make it in the end. I wasn't sure where to place it, so I've popped that aside for another layout. You can kind of see it on the page there at the moment, but it just wasn't working anywhere. Just the design I had, there was nowhere for it to naturally hang from. So I'll save that. Now I start off with one of the element stickers for my title, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it says. I think it says The Magic of Christmas. My screen is really tiny when I do my voiceover, so it's really hard to see what things say, but I think it says The Magic of Christmas, and I loved that, and I backed it with some white cardstock just to give it a white frame, because where I've fussy cut all of my the flowers and the leaves, I've left a little white border on them, so I've got a white frame around my photo, and I wanted the same with that title. But you'll see at the end in the close-ups, I actually changed that title for a Bramble Fox perspective, because I just felt like it was a bit bigger and just fit with the page a little bit better. But yeah, so at the moment I'm planning to use that sticker, and I've also done the same thing with the large Christmas tree from the element stickers. I've stuck it to white cardstock and trimmed it off with a little bit of a white border, and I love that tree. It's perfect because my photo is taken in front of our big tree. That works really nicely, and I'm still trying to get this bauble in, but I think it was about this point I realised that it just wasn't going to work. So I've got my Christmas tree over to the right there, and then I'm just layering up and building some clusters of all those fussy cut pine leaves, and got some holly leaves and the poinsettias. So they're going to go to the left of my photo, and then a couple just behind my my title and around that Christmas tree. And at this point I've done my usual trick of getting everything on the page and really liking how it looks, but nothing is stuck down, and I haven't distressed any of these edges, so I've got to now take everything up. And I do try and go piece by piece, so just picking one bit up, distressing the edges, and then trying to get it stuck in place so that I don't kind of lose that composition and the shape that I had. So you'll see here I'm distressing the edges, and then I'll pick the next bit up after I've stuck them all together, and I'm just going to continue like that until all the pieces are stuck into place. So there we go, I've skipped through the rest of that for you. I've added some craft foam behind my photo just to raise it up from everything else, and now I can move all of those as one big large piece, which makes it much easier because I want to add a little bit of stenciling behind that. And what I've actually done is just put a couple of bits of sticky tape behind, or double-sided tape behind all those papers, just to hold it in place so that I can still lift the edges up to add some stenciling. And I'm actually using an older Echo Park stencil. It's from the Jingle All the Way collection, and I really love how this looks. It's got some lovely little like pine leaves and little holly berries on it. So I'm going to add this stenciling in two areas on the page. The bottom left, I'm using a red distress ink, and that is called Festive Berries, that shade. It's a lovely rich deep red colour. And I've gone for red down there because that area has a lot of green patterned papers in it, so I thought the red would sort of bring that colour down then, that corner a bit more. And then in the top right, I'm going to use a green distress oxide, that's called Rustic Wilderness. And then I've got that big chunk of red patterned paper up there, so I thought that the green would sit quite nicely behind that. And it just spreads the colour around the page a bit more evenly. And I'm simply just using a blending brush for this and pressing that colour through the stencil, and I love how crisp that comes out looking. It just adds a little bit of detail to the background. It's not a massive amount of mixed media, but it just uses some of that space and doesn't leave it looking so bare. And I love using stencils in that way. It's just a little detail, but it just makes a difference to the page, I find, and it's not messy at all. So really simple to do. If you've got some blending brushes or the little Tim Holtz, like I think they're called dabbers or daubers, really easy to apply some of these distress inks and oxides through a stencil. So highly recommend that if you want to add some bits and pieces to your backgrounds. And now that the majority of my layout is sort of built and stuck in place, I can get on with just embellishing and adding all these flowers and leaf sprigs back in. And I just love how these look. Really, really pretty. And it was this patterned paper with all these flowers and leaves on that really drew me to this collection. Obviously, you've got the traditional reds and greens anyway, but this patterned paper in particular, I just absolutely adored and thought, oh, that would be great to fussy cut and use as embellishing. So yeah, I pretty much fussy cut the whole sheet, so I've got loads of those left for some other layouts as well, and that will really stretch this collection. So along with those and that element sticker sheet, I've got lots of embellishments to use. And I can also use things like the 3x4 and 6x4 journaling card pattern papers. They've got some fantastic images on that I could fussy cut and use as titles, even as Santas, snowmen, Christmas trees, loads of things. So it's a really good way to stretch a collection. So I've got all those leaves in place now. I've used some foam pads behind them just to raise them up and create a bit more dimension on the page. I'm just having a look through the sticker sheet to see if there's anything else I want to add. I did want to get some baubles on the page because we are sat in front of our decorated Christmas tree and there's baubles in the background. But that one that I initially fussy cut was just a bit big, but I do find a couple of smaller ones on the sticker sheet that work really nicely, so they're not too overbearing, so I can have them sort of dangling down the page, and they kind of look natural there, whereas that larger one just didn't really look quite right. But I'm much happier with these smaller ones. So I've got that into place. I'm just having a look through the papers now. You can see all the bits and pieces there that you could fussy cut. I was just looking to see if there was anything else I wanted to use before finishing off with some splatters. And just remembered that I stuck the centre part of those pattern papers down with some tape, just sort of tacked them in place so that I could do that stenciling, and then I never went back and sort of secured them. So I'm just adding some foam pads now underneath all the edges just to raise the edges up. I do love to have lots of layers and dimension on my pages, just really makes me happy. I hate a flat layout, and I know it's mad because I don't get as many layouts in my albums, but I just love to have that dimension, and foam pads are a great way to achieve that. So almost finished now. I'm just adding some gold splatters. This is just a standard gold acrylic paint that I just add a tiny bit to some packaging and water it down and use for splattering, and because it's metallic, it gives a lovely shine. And then I wanted to add some Nouveau drops, but my Nouveau drop collection, oh, I love it. I've got a whole rainbow shelf of Nouveau drops. But in the winter, it gets really cold in my craft room and they do tend to clog up a bit. So I have got one here I'm going to use. You'll see in the close-ups, but I did have to put it in a mug of warm water just to sort of loosen it up and get it going. And you can see there as well, I swapped that title out for that Bramble Fox perspective and just really love how that looks with this page. And that is me done. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the layout and the collection. It's in store now, so do check it out on the Papermaze website. I'll leave a link to the shop in the description box below, and there's more details about the products I've used on the Papermaze blog as well. So thanks very much for joining me. I'll leave you with the last couple of close-ups and I'll see you next time.